We are about to embark on an immersive journey through the corridors of our minds. Stand by as we prepare for departure.
Welcome aboard, everyone, to the Productivity with Peace of Mind podcast adventure. Our journey will begin in just a moment. Inhale deeply and exhale. Our voyage takes us on a captivating tour, diving deep into the intricate layers of our thoughts and imagination. Brace yourselves for the complexities of our evolution. For a safe and enjoyable journey, stay seated, secure your helmet and protective goggles, and keep hands, feet, and legs inside while the ride is moving. Now relax and enjoy.
What if I told you that making messes can actually lead to more happiness? We're going to uncover why this is true on today's episode. Today, we have an incredibly special guest, someone very near and dear to my heart, my Grandma Claudia, who is an artist and an inspiration in my own life. Watercolor and acrylic are the mediums Claudia most uses to express the impressions she has formed from living, learning, and working in Minnesota all her life. She paints for pleasure and enjoys experimenting with various subject matters, mediums, and styles. A favorite working method of hers is to choose a palette and then allow the paint, the weather, the various natural and man made materials to interact. And from the results, she watches for images to develop into a composition. The fun of painting in this manner is she doesn't know what the painting will be until it's finished. The process for her is the reward. Claudia studied visual arts at the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis, and Mora, where she earned a BA degree in studio arts, art history, and sociology. She taught high school art and adult art education for several years and then worked outside the visual arts for several more. Now retired, she is enjoying a renewed interest in painting. She is a signature member of the North Star Water Media Society in St. Paul, Minnesota, and has been a member of the Minnesota Watercolor Society, White Bear Center for the Arts, Stillwater Art Guild Gallery, and Hallberg Center for the Arts. She has exhibited and won awards in regional, national, and international shows. So, Grandma, the my favorite part of your bio there, you say that the process is the reward for you. I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell a little bit more about your backstory, but I want you to talk on that part too because I love that piece that the process is the reward.
Well, I do believe the process is the reward. It takes the longest time and the most thought. And once the painting is finished, it's done and put away. And that's so the satisfaction comes from working out all of the options and making choices
Yeah.
and coming to a satisfying conclusion.
Right, right. Like, I feel like so many people are so focused on the reward at the end and the end game and the milestone, but that's such a small percentage of the journey that they actually forget to enjoy along the way.
Right, that's true. And as soon as I finish a piece, then I'm excited to get on with the next one.
Yes, yes, right. So, can you share with us how you first discovered your love for watercolor painting and how it has shaped your life and your creative journey along the way?
Sure. I took one introductory watercolor class at the end of my college years. It was just kind of to fill out the credits that I needed to have. And I wasn't especially excited about working with watercolor, just because I had previously been working with oils and acrylics where there's so much more control over
Oh,
the
yeah.
medium. And eventually, though, as I worked with it a little bit more, I just became excited about the spontaneity of the watercolor, the colors flowing and mixing together, and the little accidents that happen that would take me in a direction I probably hadn't thought about doing.
Yeah.
After college, then I taught high school art, and in the course of doing that, I had to present a lot of different mediums to students and let them experiment with a lot of different ideas and so on, and didn't have very much energy left to do any painting on my own after school or anything. And so it was after my early retirement that I decided I really wanted to get back to painting. And I set a goal of painting 50 pieces. And when I finished that, I was going to become more involved with art organizations and shows and so on.
Mhm.
And that's what I did. And so now watercolor is my primary medium, and I'm involved in the art community to the extent that I want to be at this point.
That's amazing. I've actually heard, it's funny that you say that, and I didn't know that about watercolor, like not actually being your first choice, because I've heard other artists say, oh yeah, I love to paint, but I don't do watercolor because it's so hard, or like it doesn't come natural to me, or it's not, naturally easy. So I actually love that you evolved and like graduated to that one that was maybe a little bit challenging, even though you weren't initially drawn to that.
Right, right. And I still do enjoy doing acrylics. I don't do
Yeah.
oils anymore, but
Okay.
I do acrylic, and actually I kind of use that medium in the same way that I would use watercolor.
Yeah.
So although that's not always true, I guess, because sometimes when I'm painting with acrylics, I like just using a palette knife and having a lot of texture on the canvas, so
Yeah.
kind of the opposite of watercolor, but I enjoy both.
That's so
So,
cool.
yeah.
Well, and I think that's kind of cool too to look at, because like even in any process, there's so many tools we can use and
Right.
there's different approaches we can have. So, like you said and you have in your bio, where there's different pieces and kind of letting them fall where they may, in a sense of
Mhm.
let's see what happens, and like let's see what we can create from this, or what we feel like using today or this week or this period of paintings that we're creating or whichever we're working on.
Mhm.
And then what role do you believe art and creativity play in fostering personal growth and self-expression, kind of like within ourselves, both for the person creating the art and for the person looking at it? So like I have never been particularly artistic myself in the sense of painting and some of those things, but I love enjoying the art. And I know I have a lot of your artwork up in my house. So even as a viewer, how can that, kind of change and evolve us?
Looking creatively at a situation requires looking with an open mind
Yeah.
and considering the options, making choices.
Yeah.
Art is unique in that it requires divergent thinking rather than convergent.
Yeah.
If you, for example, if you're teaching 20 students to add 2 + 2, you want all of them to arrive at the answer of 4,
Mm-hmm.
which is convergent. They're all coming to the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And with art, if you are telling 20 students to draw a cat,
Yeah.
you're going to be successful if you have 20 very different looking cats.
Yeah.
You
Right.
want people to be thinking outwardly
Yeah.
like that. So art encourages self-expression, and then consequently the confidence to grow as an individual.
I love that, because I mean you're inspiring creative thought, and then like I can imagine as you do that and the more you practice, like okay, what is my version of the cat that I'm
Mhm.
drawing? You go to work or school or whatever it is you're doing in your daily life, and your brain just automatically starts to think in a more creative way, and you start thinking outside the lines a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So how do you approach your process for creating art, particularly for watercolor or any of the other mediums that we've talked about? Like, do you have any rituals or particular techniques that help you, kind of like get into your creative flow, or, that gets you going? Do you schedule it out? Do you just kind of start when the moment hits, or how does that go for you?
Well, I usually don't start out with a plan, with a careful plan,
Yeah.
because it's too restricting for what I personally enjoy doing.
Yep.
And every artist has their own process for confronting that blank sheet of paper.
Yeah.
My own style is quite loose. And so, as you said in the introductory statements, I enjoy having a painting evolve
Yeah.
from whatever I start. And so, to start, sometimes when I'm looking at that blank canvas or paper, I will just choose a palette, probably limiting myself to just a few colors. And then I'll make the paper wet and drop some paint onto it and let it start moving around. And to facilitate that, I might pick it up and tilt it in one direction or another, or um, maybe use some different tools with it, or just different options. I even like painting outside in the winter so that the uh, cold will freeze some of the paint and make some
Yeah.
textures, that are interesting. But after I do that, I let the paper dry, and then I will pick it up. Sometimes I can kind of see what's going to happen from there, and sometimes I need to uh, turn it around from side to side. And once I kind of see the painting that I'm going to do, I usually can paint fairly quickly until I get to a point which is usually about 3/4 of the way finished, and then I usually find myself painted into a corner or in a box, and so I have to do something like set it aside so that I will come around the corner and see it unexpectedly, and it will just come to me what I need to do to finish the painting. So that kind of happens, but actually recently I just finished a painting that had been sitting in the corner for a year before I figured out how to get myself out of that little box. But that's my process, and everyone has different ways of doing that. Some people are very methodical. They probably are a little bit more logical and using the convergent thinking because they may have an idea before they start.
Sure.
And some people just want to get something on the paper and go from there, and that's me, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I love that idea of the spaciousness for creativity. And, I've heard, I'm really big into productivity and planning, and, very much scheduled out and all of that. And, I've heard a lot of people say, I can't schedule time because I just need that space to kind of be creative. And I've often suggested actually blocking time, or even a whole day, like, to just have that kind of playfulness you're talking about, or you know allow that evolution to just happen. So if you want that time, because what happens if we don't schedule our time, what I've realized is we lose control of it, and things can get in the way of our creativity time where we don't actually get time for it, versus being like, okay, no, this whole day is blocked for my own spacious creative time to see what happens. And maybe I grab art acrylic, maybe I grab watercolor, maybe I grab some fabric, and I find what's laying around, and I just like lean into that process. And that's so like beautiful what you just described, because it just becomes what it's meant to be, and you're just present for that process.
I feel that way sometimes, yeah. What you were talking about is kind of a combination of convergent and divergent thinking,
Oh,
where
okay, yeah.
you're being logical and thinking of a way to set this up and to make things happen, and
Yeah.
then they do. So it's a combination, and that's probably a really good way to work.
Right. Yeah. Because there's focus time where you can say, okay, in these, 3, 4 hours, I'm going to produce this result. I'm going to create this exact thing. But then I'll also block spacious time for myself. Like I've blocked entire Saturdays or maybe a whole Friday night where I'm like, this is time for me to be spacious, creative, and I'm just going to see what I do. Maybe I end up writing, maybe I end up napping, maybe I end up reading, maybe I end up
Right.
meeting a friend spontaneously for a walk. And it's just kind of open for me to, play in that space and be free because our lives are so scheduled.
Mhm.
It almost becomes critical, at least for me, with, so many different moving pieces to have that time to like, okay, this is where I get to just be.
Right, right. I know of artists who will just tell their friends and everyone else,
Yeah.
I don't have time for coffee. I don't have time
Yep.
for any of that. It's kind of like saying, okay, I can't be your friend for a while because
Yeah.
I have this time I need, and within that you can create and
Yeah.
feel free to do things.
I love the story that you tell about when I was a little girl and we were on a walk together and I had stopped to actually jump in a puddle,
Mhm.
which is something like now as an adult, like logical brain, I would probably avoid. And so I stopped to jump and splash in the puddle before we continued on our walk. And for me, this kind of symbolizes that importance of embracing spontaneity and joy in life and kind of that enjoying the journey that we talked about. Can you share more about that and how we can sometimes actually lose that playful side of ourselves in adulthood?
Mhm. I think that definitely happens with the responsibilities of adulthood, and sometimes we just get too tired to play.
Yeah.
And in art, though, we know that the painting is our own, and we can do whatever we want with it. It's just paint on paper,
Yeah.
or paper, or paint on canvas,
Yeah.
and we don't have to meet anyone else's expectations because
Ooh.
it's ours to make or break, I guess. But and in life, I think you can just keep things in perspective and enjoy the moment. That's probably the way to live with spontaneity and be happy.
Right. So this is one I can particularly take advice on. But how would you say the willingness to actually be messy, make mistakes, from your experience, how does the willingness to be messy, make mistakes, and then learn from them contribute to our artistic growth and innovation?
Well, if you're going to paint, there's going to be a mess. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And from the mess and mistakes, we discover new ideas usually,
Yeah.
and or at least learn what not to do next time.
Mm-hmm.
So especially with watercolor, there are little accidents that artists talk about. The paint kind of does its own thing sometimes, and that can create something that we wouldn't have thought of doing, or lead us in an exciting new direction. It might take us completely away from what we were first thinking when we started working, even though, as I said, when I paint, I don't have drawing or something. I
Yeah.
almost never draw before I start painting.
Mm-hmm.
Although people would say, yes, you're still drawing with your paintbrush, whatever you're doing.
Yeah. But I think that's really a good analogy for life though, because we oftentimes do have such high expectations. And I think we really can only plan for what we are going to do for ourselves.
Mhm.
And then we do have to kind of surrender to what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You can imagine that you're going to go to a wedding and you're imagining how everything is going to
Yeah.
look and how
Yeah.
everything is going to be, and it doesn't go that way at all. And afterward, you realize that you really had a fun time, and it wasn't what you expected, but it was
Yeah.
better.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's even better than you
Yeah,
expected.
it is true.
My mantra for myself this year has been that a little reminder to myself that I have to figure out what doesn't work in order to figure out what does work. Because a lot
Mhm.
of times I love this, like my brain works in such like metaphors. So I love this idea of a maze.
Mhm.
So let's say you go to a fall festival and you intentionally buy tickets to walk through a maze. And so as you're walking through, you're going to hit dead ends and you're going to go backwards and then go forward and figure out new routes. And yet in life, for some reason, we hit dead ends and we're like, well, that didn't work. I failed. I'm going to quit, right? I don't know why we do that, but
That's a good thought. Very good analogy.
yeah, because I mean, really, like it's part of the journey, like with your painting and with any new endeavor in life, those who truly do succeed farther are the ones who have run into those dead ends
Oh,
far
yes.
more often and kept going
Mhm.
because they're like, oh yeah, this isn't the way. I'm gonna try 5 more ways. I'm okay with that.
Exactly. You started out with many options and now you're going to narrow that down until you find
Yes.
the way.
Yeah, and I love what you said too about sometimes it can turn out even better than you
Oh,
thought.
yeah, it definitely does.
Right, because and that only can happen when we are then open to that
Right.
happening versus like so tunnel vision or so lasered in on it has to go exactly this way. If we're that way, we miss all
Mhm.
these other options. Like with your painting, if you were like, no, it has to be exactly this, and you're working with something as uh wild as watercolor that can go in any direction, and you're like, I
It
want it to be
can.
exactly this, you're gonna be disappointed.
Yeah, it can go in any direction at all. And sometimes it goes so fast.
Yeah.
Those changes will happen so fast that sometimes I have to stop and look and get used to something
Yeah.
before I can go on to the next step,
Yeah.
because it wasn't what I was expecting was going to happen. But
Yeah.
um, it's interesting process painting.
Absolutely. You illustrated a book that I wrote as a very young girl. And you're also creating the cover to the book that I'm writing now as an adult. What do you find fulfilling about bringing stories to life through art? And how do you approach the process of visual storytelling in your paintings? So, how do you kind of, tell stories through the art that you're creating every day?
That's kind of an interesting question for me because personally, I don't try to paint stories.
Mm,
I just for myself, I
mm-hmm.
find that kind of tight and not interesting to do because it's
Yeah,
a preconceived idea.
right.
And it's so but what is really satisfying to me is when a viewer comments on how they feel when they look
Yeah.
at a painting. And so, that tells me that I have communicated something um, that we can share emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my response to that. I guess I don't really try to do visual storytelling, and I know some people do that
Mm-hmm.
really well.
Yeah.
I think of famous artists like Picasso. There's a painting, Guernica, that is very unsettling and disturbing for people to look at, but
Mm-hmm.
that just isn't my
Yeah.
lane.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Do you think when people look at your art there, because so for me, I'm always thinking about the world in stories in the sense that like our brain actually makes sense of data through storytelling, whether it's they're thinking a story related to what they're seeing or thinking back to maybe stories in their life. So when they look at your art, do you think that they are maybe through those emotions that it's invoking and what it's awakening within them, their own life stories or maybe what it means for them?
It could, sure, it could. I mean, even colors can do that. Certain
Yeah.
colors will
Yeah.
remind people of something and create a feeling, an
Yeah.
emotion within them.
Yeah. Even you did a painting that is hanging in my bedroom. It's one of the paintings in the series Silvery Moon. And for me, I think about magical nights, cross country skiing in the snow with my mom, learning to downhill ski in Colorado
Mhm.
and things like that. And so for me, it awakens so much within me just to look at your paintings. I mean, even the room we're sitting in right now has this beautiful flower that you painted me as a child. And for me, it just represents brightness and livelihood and possibility. And for me, it was always such a source of inspiration and what's possible in the world to go out and grow into.
That's very nice. I'm glad you can put those feelings in, or that painting elicits those kinds of feelings within you. That's very satisfying to me.
Yeah. How do you navigate moments of self-doubt or maybe creative blocks, however you experience that in your artistic practice? And what advice would you give to any aspiring artist or someone who maybe wants to play with creativity a little bit more, who are facing some similar challenges or what you called it before, that the white palette or the white canvas in front of them?
Mhm. Well, like I said before, I often run into a wall when I paint.
Yeah.
And usually the solution will present itself if I set the painting somewhere where I'm
Yeah.
just going to look at it unexpectedly, see it with fresh eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, though, that doesn't really work, and I just have to methodically go through the elements and principles of design and think, now, what if I changed certain lines or some colors in here?
Yeah.
What if a shape is different? Am I putting this together with a dominant shape and supporting shapes anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Following the elements and principles of design anyway, and so that will
Yeah.
help me to know where to go with it. And as an example, one roadblock that I ran into was a painting that I had done of my daughter, and it was when she was young and she was playing dress up with a little neighbor friend. She had on a long dress that was flowing on the ground, and I painted that, but I did not like it. There was something wrong with that painting. And finally, when I just tried different things and ended up turning it around upside down, I could see a waterfall and
Oh my gosh.
and cliffs and rocks and different things in it. And so I just turned it into that. It became a semi-abstract landscape, really. That was much better, and I'm really happy with that. So sometimes if there is a painting, for example, that you're not happy with, it should be kept. I don't believe in just throwing things out because I consider them a failure.
Yeah.
I keep them, and eventually they may become part of a collage or be cropped into something smaller and framed as something different from what I was thinking in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So a different mindset can turn a problem into a success.
That's incredible. And I think that applies to life as a whole too, because anything in life that we think, oh, that's a failure, it's so easy to
Mhm.
write it off or think we've wasted our time or it wasn't worth it. But really it's being like, I love the idea of the mental thought of a collage,
Mhm.
even in life experiences, because that really is all coming together as us, as you,
Mhm.
as one human being with such a unique perspective and
Right.
ideas and all of that.
Right. I agree with that.
Are there any memorable experiences or lessons that you have learned along your journey as an artist that have had a lasting impact on your perspective for creativity and life in general?
Well, when I was thinking about this, I thought probably just advising people to hang loose,
Mm,
stay open-minded,
yeah,
think about options. The painting or your life is yours to make of what you will. All other factors considered. Of course, there are some
yeah,
other influences on our lives, but
yeah.
as much as we can, it's yours, and take responsibility for making good choices and turning it into what you want.
Yes. Oh gosh, I love that. That's beautiful. What do you hope viewers and admirers of your artwork take away from experiencing your creations, whether it's your paintings or an illustration or any other forms of artistic expressions that you create?
I would like to know that people have connected with the painting on an emotional level and that they feel it has added something positive to their life for taking the time to look at it and maybe having it hanging in their homes or whatever they choose to do with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's about all.
That's got to be cool, though, to know that you have directly created something that is a part of someone's living, breathing home that they're looking at every day and feeling inspired or creative because of what they're seeing that you created from your own creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is satisfying. Actually, sometimes when something sells at a show and I don't know who bought it, that's kind of a sad thing, like.
You want to know where it
Where
went?
did it go?
Yeah.
Who's looking at it, and I hope they're enjoying it, or they wouldn't have bought it, I suppose, but.
Yeah. As we wrap up, what advice would you give to anyone who might feel either hesitant or maybe a little intimidated to explore their own creativity? And how can they cultivate a mindset of that curiosity and experimentation so they don't feel like they have to have such a rigid result or plan or way to get there?
Mhm. I would just say to try it,
Yeah.
and whatever that creative expression is, if it's painting or writing or taking a dance class or taking a walk with your camera,
Yeah.
don't worry about how your first efforts look. And it's a process. There are always going to be stops and starts, and for sure misses to deal with,
Yeah.
but it's a rewarding thing to do.
And if anyone listening to this wants to find you or check out the art that you have created, how could they do that?
Well, I do have a website. It is claudiahanson.art, claudiahanson.art. It's all just lowercase. And you can see what I do with my loose, open-ended method of painting.
And we'll link that below as well so people can click on that easily and go check out your work. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know that your time is valuable, and the fact that you spent time with me to create this together means the world to me.
Well, it's been fun to do. I hope some of these answers make sense to people and that they will enjoy art.
I agree. Thank you so much. Thank you for braving the inside of your mind with me. The better we understand ourselves, the more deeply we understand the world, and as our awareness grows, life just gets better and better. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a review and share this with anyone else you think could benefit from listening. A quick reminder that the content shared in this podcast is for informational purposes only. I am not a licensed therapist, and the discussions here are not a substitute for professional advice. If you're dealing with a specific issue or need personalized guidance, please consult with a qualified professional. Your well-being is important, and this podcast is simply a platform for sharing insights and experiences. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Until next time.